Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ransomware Defense Blueprint, the SentinelOne Advantage. Today's webinar is sponsored by SentinelOne and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I am with Actual Tech Media, and I am really thrilled today to be your moderator for this special event. But before we get to the content, we do need to cover some housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this webinar today. Okay, first off, we want your questions. Put them in the questions box in your webinar control panel. That should be up there on your right-hand side. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a dedicated Q&A session with our expert to discuss some of the top questions that you ask. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A, and we will provide further technical assistance. Okay, next up, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find some really good resources there too. Now, that handout section, if you're looking for it, is right next to that questions tab. Now, there I especially want to call out a couple of important documents from SentinelOne, including a data sheet on its Singularity endpoint and another one on Singularity identity. Download both of those right now. They are free and chock full of great info. Also in the handout section, you'll find a link to the ATM Decisions group, which gives you access to in-depth events and other opportunities. You will also find in that handout section a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events just like this one for you. Okay, third, at the end of this webinar event, we are going to be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one of you lucky attendees today. Now, you have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. If you're having trouble going to sleep or whatever, you might want to look that over because it's a lot of legalese. So that's something for you to consider there. All right, finally, one of the great benefits of this event and all Actual Tech Media events is the opportunity to ask questions of our expert presenters, as I mentioned earlier. Now, to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you today. That is another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. So how this works is after the event's over, we're going to look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. So in other words, several chances to win today. And with that, why don't we get to the main event? I cannot wait for this. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today, Joseph Salazar, a technical marketing engineer with SentinelOne. Joseph, thank you so much for being here today. It's a delight to have you on. The floor, sir, is yours.
Thank you very much for having me. So today I want to talk to you all about how to protect against ransomware and how SentinelOne has very unique solutions that will help you with this. So a little bit about myself. I've been in the industry for a very long time, but I was also in the military. I was enlisted and then retired as a major after getting my commission, with 22 years as a counterintelligence agent, military intelligence officer, and the last 8 years of my career were in cybersecurity, and I actually predate cybercom. And like I said, I've been a private security practitioner for over 20 years, both public and private sector, doing incident response, network defense, and computer forensics. So when I talk about things, I'm going to be talking about them from the view of a practitioner. So because I've been in the trenches, I spent a lot of time as a SOC lead, as an incident responder, as a computer forensic investigator. So when I talk about the things that I'm talking about them from the view of a practitioner. So this is our agenda for today. We're actually going to go through the anatomy of ransomware attack, a typical ransomware attack. It's not what you think. A lot of people think that it's you just get on and you try to get as many systems as possible. It's much more sophisticated than that. They're going to outline a playbook on how you can defend against ransomware, and then we'll talk specifically about how SentinelOne solutions help you with this. And then I'm actually going to demo those solutions, and then we'll go ahead and do some Q&A. So how about some polls? First of all, please feel free to answer. What solution do you rely on for ransomware, and check all that apply? because there's no such thing as a single solution for ransomware, and we all know this. So I'm going to go ahead and wait a few moments, and then please make sure that you check all that apply and then hit the submit button. And then we're going to go ahead and look through and see what people respond. So we're getting some responses already. I'm going to wait a few more moments. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and look at some results. So it is no surprise that most people are relying on backup and recovery. The EPP and EDR is expected, and so with cyber insurance, that's actually not much of a surprise either. Identity security. So I'm very curious to hear what you guys consider identity security, but that's for another talk. But when we talk about identity security, I'm not talking about IAM or PAM or MFA. When we talk about identity security, we're actually talking about it a little bit different way, and you're going to hear a bit about it today. HIPS, that's also expected, and not as much, because again, a lot of people don't deploy HIPS. And then UEBA, which I'm not surprised is very, very low on the list, meaning 0, because that's really hard to tune. All right, next question. How often do you back up your workstations or endpoints? We just saw in the previous question that most of you actually do backups, rely on backups. So how often do you back up your workstations, right? Not your servers, but your workstations. Okay, we're getting some responses now. And the answers are not surprising. All right. Let's go ahead and see. All right, so for some of you, daily, which actually that's a bit more than I expected. Weekly, that's about average. Monthly, that's really bad. We don't. That's what I expected, actually. Most companies do not back up the workstations. They usually have room for backups for critical servers and their Active Directory maybe, and a few other applications, but most companies don't back up their workstations. Or if they do, it's only the data, right? And which is why a lot of companies are going to cloud. And then the last question, have you experienced a ransomware attack? So yes, no, don't know, or prefer not to answer. I'm having my coffee, I apologize. And it's okay, this is completely anonymous, so please don't worry about it. Okay, let's go ahead and have a look and see how people are responding. Yes, 2%. No, 56%. Okay, don't know. Yeah, and then prefer not to answer. Yeah, that's understandable. There's some interesting research out there from the Identity and Defined Security Alliance that says that it's actually interesting results that more companies have experienced a ransomware attack than not. And of those, a significant majority have experienced a business impact because of that ransomware attack. If you're those of you who are interested in looking at those stats, it's the IDSA, the Identity Defined Security Alliance, and those reports are readily available. So let's get on with it. Let's look at what a ransomware attack actually looks like. So first of all, an attacker is going to get into an endpoint, and this is accomplished any number of ways. The chief way is social engineering. And a user is going to click on a link or get a phone call and allow access, or something's going to happen and an attacker is going to get in. This is where it gets interesting. The attacker is actually going to conduct reconnaissance. They're going to conduct credential reconnaissance, right? So they're going to steal credentials locally on the endpoints because those give them targets of opportunity and access, right? And they're also going to look at Active Directory because Active Directory is going to give them a target list. It's going to give them a list of service accounts, domain admins, and other privileged access users. Then they're going to steal credentials, whether it is through applications on the endpoint, or they're going to use something like AD-find, or even just built-in commands like the net command or queries against Active Directory that they can then use to run attacks. They're going to steal credentials, right? There's an application called Lasagna that can steal credentials from approximately 40 applications on your endpoint. And then you know about tools like Mimikatz, which can steal credentials and run attacks from memory. And And then they're going to exploit those credentials. So they're going to use those credentials to do privilege escalation attacks, move laterally, find access, and increase that access so that they can do things like spread the ransomware. Then they're going to execute what are called LOBAS, living off the land, binaries, and scripts. Now, this is so that they can persist on the network and you can never get them out. The goal here for them is that they can get in and they're going to stay in as long as they can. Now, these persistence mechanisms can be everywhere. They can be on the endpoints. They can be running on your servers. They can be multiple different backdoors on the same system. It's endless. They can even run scripts that make use of applications that are already installed. For example, if you are running Microsoft Office, that installs approximately 40,000 APIs that the attacker can use and access and assemble scripts so that it can take advantage of them. And they can do things like escalate privileges and actually execute code. And then the attacker is going to move laterally to find, say, Active Directory. They're going to find the other systems, and then they're going to spread their payload. They're going to compromise data. They're going to execute the ransomware. They even steal that ransomware, and then they can do what's called double extortion, where they're threatened to release that data unless you pay another ransom. So that's a typical ransomware attack. It's a lot more complicated than most people think, and it's gotten a lot more advanced than it was maybe even 10 years ago. So let's look at a playbook for ransomware. Now, this follows a typical flow. First of all, you want to prepare. And the best way to prepare is to know your environment. You want to identify and inventory all assets that are on your network. Now, why is this important? Because you'll know what's there. If an attacker chooses to physically compromise your perimeter, plug in a laptop from some unused data port in a conference room, they've bypassed all your perimeter security. So know what systems are supposed to be on your network. Have something like network access control, right? Know what your exposures are, which is the next step, right? Identify vulnerabilities, identify exposures. Look for what exists in your environment that an attacker can compromise and know where an attacker can strike. So for example, if I as an attacker query your Active Directory and I find a user with replication permissions, I know that I can run a golden ticket attack against that user ID, because then I can replicate I can pull hashes from the domain controller. I can replay those hashes, and then I can generate what's called a golden ticket so that I can access any server, and then I can detonate my payload on that server. And now your production database is under my ransom. Even your Active Directory will be under my ransom, right? So you want to identify the exposures. You want to identify things that an attacker can target. And then you want to manage your risks. You want to remediate any exposures or vulnerabilities. Now, this includes more than just patching, right? You want to have a good idea of your entire environment. You want to be so cognizant and aware of all the devices, all the vulnerabilities, what you can remediate, and what you can place compensating controls around to minimize any remaining risks that you have if you cannot remediate an exposure or vulnerability because of operational reasons. Now, that's actually very common. For example, a lot of companies know that SMB version 1 is extremely vulnerable to attack, but they may have applications, legacy applications, like mainframe applications that talk to the Windows environment that rely on something like SMB version 1 or another insecure legacy protocol, so they can't turn it off, right? So you want to implement compensating controls to help deal with that type of an issue. The next thing you want to do is protect, right? You've remediated and reduced your attack surface. You've got an asset inventory of all systems and applications and services that are supposed to be on your network. Now you want to detect any malicious activities and try to prevent them from happening on any vulnerabilities you could not remediate, right? So you want to detect and prevent malicious code execution or suspicious behaviors that indicate malicious intent, right? This is why I asked about UEBA, right? An attacker can act like a regular user, but if they're using the identity of a regular user and doing things that user isn't supposed to be doing, you can identify that with UEBA. You can identify if there are applications that are behaving in unnecessarily insecure ways or suspiciously, right? But you want to look for activities that could indicate malicious intent. And then, of course, you want to stop credential compromise. If I can steal a credential as an attacker, I can be anyone on that network, right? And you can detect it because I'm showing up as a legitimate user. So you want to prevent attackers from exploiting identity data, whether it's on the endpoint or in Active Directory, to prevent them from masquerading as a legitimate user, because this way they can't remain undetected, right? If you can find them and prevent them from compromising credentials, they cannot hide among the herd. They can't hide their activities as legitimate user activities. And that's very important, because one of the key pieces of data that attackers go after is identity data. They want to steal usernames. They want to steal passwords. They want to steal certificates, secrets, credentials, anything that can gain access to the environment legitimately, because it saves them a lot of time and effort and reduces the amount of noise they make by doing things like running a brute force attack. And then, of course, you want to disrupt attacker activity, right? You want to deny them the ability to spread across a network, right? You want them to attack non-priority or low-value targets, right? You don't want them going after your production databases, right? This is where you can implement things like deception or misdirection, right? You want to use things that will prevent the attacker from getting further into the environment without you detecting them. And you want to prevent them from damaging something critical, like your Active Directory or production database. So you want to disrupt their ability to move laterally, to spread, and to remain undetected while doing so. And then, last but not least, you want to focus on recovery. You want to know that if you are attacked, that you can get back to a known good state. So you want to have telemetry. You want to be able to analyze the root cause and progression of an attack and identify where your controls can improve, right? You want to do root cause analysis. You want to see if there was a setting that the attacker took advantage of that you can change. You want to see if there's a hole in your detection coverage or a firewall rule that allowed lateral movement, right? An internal firewall rule. You want to respond and investigate. This is where telemetry becomes extremely important, because you want to remediate compromised endpoints and you want to improve the processes to reduce the mean time to respond to an attack, and you want to have faster investigations. So you need active telemetry. You need ways to speed up your detection capability, and you want a way to really target the information that you need to investigate, to respond, and to understand how deep the attacker went, what kind of damage they created, and how far you have to roll back. And then the last step, of course, is restoration, where you want to roll back systems, restore them to a known good state, recover any data from snapshots or backups, so that you can get on with your life and get on with business, right? You want any attack, particularly something like ransomware, to be as low impact as possible. So let's look at some solutions that can help you with this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Singularity. The Singularity is our platform, right, from SentinelOne. And there are several aspects of this platform that really stand out. First of all, the platform is actually sits on our own data lake. Now, that data lake makes querying extremely valuable, because we get information and telemetry from every sensor in the environment, as well as every partner, and you can ingest data from any source. Now, what makes that important is that that data lake is actually powered by our Purple AI. Our Purple AI allows you to use native language queries, and then it will suggest additional queries to help you hunt and narrow down your threat hunting so that you can find the information much faster. Remember how I said telemetry is important, making use of it is important, and understanding it quickly is important, because that helps you reduce your time to respond? That's what Purple AI can do for you. But beyond that, there are special parts of the platform that I want to focus on specifically for ransomware. The first is Endpoint. Our Endpoint is market leading, it is autonomous, and it is AI driven. We were AI driven from the Endpoint before AI was a buzzword. Since the inception of the company, our Endpoint component has been AI driven. So what that means is it can identify attacks either statically or based on behavior. It can identify and take immediate action without your input. And that's the AI driven part. And that's what I mean by autonomous. It can respond for you without you, and it'll actually help you by conjoining all alerts of a particular incident into one so that you can see it. And it does this by creating what's called a storyline. It's going to track all the processes that execute. It's going to show you the full execution path, every piece of telemetry that it can find and record, and then it's going to give you an easy to use analysis graphing that will help you pinpoint and investigate. And I'm going to show that a little bit later. The next piece is identity. We're the only solution that has a native endpoint identity component. Other solutions have to sit on the network and they have to correlate with their endpoint agent to give you identity information and identity alerts. We don't. It is baked into our endpoint component. So it exists on every endpoint, and we do things that the regular, that other solutions don't. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. And then we have vulnerability management. And our vulnerability management covers two aspects. It's going to tell you what applications and what assets out there are vulnerable to attack, but it's also going to give you identity-based vulnerabilities in your Active Directory and on your endpoint, something a lot of solutions can't do. So we'll identify exposures not only in your Active Directory, but in stored credentials on your endpoint. We'll also, because of the identity component, identify credential theft and misuse and attacks targeting your Active Directory. So let's get a little bit more deeply into those components. So Ranger AD. Ranger AD falls under what's called identity posture management. This is part of the preparation phase. Now, Ranger AD has three functions. First of all, it's going to reduce the identity attack, the AD attack surface, right? What it does is it'll look at your Active Directory. It'll identify any configuration changes to help conform with your best practices, and it's going to eliminate excessive privileges with quick remediation. So what that means is it's going to look at your Active Directory. It's going to identify misconfigurations, bad policies, bad settings in your Active Directory that you can fix, and it'll actually fix a subset of these automatically, and it'll give you the remediation steps for the manual remediation, because some things you have to do manually. And then it's going to track any changes that happen and evaluate them on a regular, continuous basis, as well as running weekly, regular scheduled reassessments. So this is continuous assessment of your Active Directory. So it's going to analyze your identity exposures. It's going to pinpoint critical domain, computer, and user level exposures in your Active Directory, right? It's going to look at those and identify when things change. It's going to track and give you a health score as to how well you're doing in improving your Active Directory health risk status. And then you're going to see it improve as you make fixes. And then if it suddenly gets worse, you know that something was changed, that it identified as an exposure, and you can go and investigate it. And it is extremely flexible in how and what you can remediate. And then, of course, there's an additional component that can detect Active Directory attack indicators. So it's going to actively look for things that hit the Active Directory database, indicating potential Active Directory attacks, like mass account changes, deletions, password changes, right? It's going to identify those because those are indicators of an attack happening. There's actually another component that works alongside this with Singularity Identity that can help identify things like golden ticket attacks, silver ticket attacks, AC rep roast, DC, AD rep roasting, skeleton key attacks, DC sync, DC shadow. It can even identify those types of identity-based attacks. And then the next part, and let's see, is Singularity Identity. Now, Singular Identity is our identity threat detection and response solution. For those of you who aren't aware, identity threat detection and response is a relatively recent category, specifically around identifying and responding to identity-based attacks. The reason why this category came about, Gartner helped create it, and we actually helped Gartner create this category, is because they realized that EPP and EDR didn't necessarily cover identity-based attacks. They covered the tools sometimes, but they wouldn't identify if, say, an attacker was harvesting credential information from your Active Directory. So that's what ITDR and that's what Singularity Identity is designed to do. It's designed to defeat identity-based attacks. So it's going to detect and respond to identity-based attacks, not only from your endpoints, but also targeting your Active Directory. And this is extremely early in the attack cycle, right? Because if you consider when identity-based attacks happen, they happen during reconnaissance. So an attacker is going to get in and they're going to compromise that first system. Then they're going to conduct identity reconnaissance. That identity reconnaissance is considered an identity-based attack, and that's when you can detect them using ITDR. And so what it's going to do is it's going to protect credentials and identities. And remember how I said that we do it differently from everyone else? Well, we are the only solution that can actively hide and deny access to local and network stored credentials. So any credentials stored on your endpoints, in your applications, or in the operating system, or any Active Directory objects that are considered sensitive or privileged. So this will simultaneously disrupt lateral movement and prevent data theft and misuse. So credential data theft and misuse. So we're the only one that can actually do that. So not only can we detect and protect against and respond to identity-based attacks, we can actually prevent them from getting anything useful if they even try to steal a credential. And that's where we get to the lure, misdirect, and deceive. So instead of just hiding and denying access to these credentials, we will actually provide decoy credential data as bait. Now, say an attacker queries Active Directory for a list of domain admins, which is net space user space domain admin space / domain, right? Domain admins in quotes. That is a standard query that I can execute from any Windows endpoint, and it'll give me a list of all domain admins. If the attacker runs that and you've got Singularity Identity in place, not only is it going to hide those domain admins, it's actually going to provide a decoy set of domain admins in their place. And these decoy domain admins can actually point them to a decoy Active Directory if you want to set one up. Or it can actually point them to a black hole or another decoy system that will host an application. Let's say, for example, they steal an SSH server credential. We can actually set up a decoy SSH server that a decoy credential points to, right? So the idea here is that you're going to misdirect them away from a production asset to a non-production asset or a black hole or a tar pit. So not only are you getting an early alert, you're delaying their attack. And then the last piece is, is Singularity Endpoint. Now, Singularity Endpoint covers not only the preparation, but also the detection and the recovery phase. So it's automatic detection and response. We combine static and behavioral detection to neutralize known and unknown threats and respond automatically at the endpoint. I mentioned a little bit of that earlier. We also provide automatic correlation for all events to reconstruct the threat while collecting valuable forensic telemetry from the attack. So that's called Storyline. And we actually offer another piece of this called remote forensics, where you can actually conduct and collect forensic evidence, forensically sound evidence. Now that's important because as a forensic examiner, when we talk about forensics, it's not just about getting data. It's about getting data and ensuring that it isn't modified during transit or storage or analysis. And so when we talk about remote forensics, we are collecting forensics in a sound and in a forensically sound manner, meaning if you had to submit it for evidence to a court, it will stand up to forensic examination. So we can provide these things from our Singularity Endpoint, our EPP and EDR. And then even better, we can do full investigation and rollback. So we can remediate and roll back endpoints with a single click to help reduce mean time to respond. And we can also accelerate investigations because everything is in that single alert. So if you get like 24, 30 different alerts, different events, but they're all part of the same incident because they're all part of the same attack, we're going to correlate all those as a single alert. So you're not going to get alerted 30, 40 different times for 30, 40 different attacks. You're going to get alerted once, and all of that information is correlated so that you can investigate it in a simple manner, and you can actually conduct remediation across all of those affected devices from that single alert. And I'll show you that in the demo. So why don't we look to see what an attack actually looks like now that we've got SentinelOne in the environment. So remember, the attacker is going to conduct credential reconnaissance. Even before that, you've got Ranger AD and you've got Singularity Endpoint that will go and help identify the critical vulnerabilities in your Active Directory and in your regular endpoint. That's one thing I forgot to mention, is that Singularity Endpoint actually has what's called Ranger, and Ranger will help identify all the assets. So it'll create an asset inventory in your environment. And we also have a function called Ranger Insights, which will identify vulnerabilities on those endpoints so that you can remediate them. So even before the attacker accesses an endpoint, you've done what you could to reduce the identity attack surface and to reduce your regular asset attack surface. So the attacker is going to conduct reconnaissance. Singular identity is going to conceal credentials and Active Directory data. The attacker is going to steal credentials. Singularity identity is going to give decoy credentials and AD data. And Singularity Endpoint is going to prevent malware execution. So it's actually going to do things like prevent Mimikatz from actually executing, or Lasagna or any other application like that. So the attacker is going to attempt to exploit credentials. Singularity identity is going to prevent privilege escalation. Again, we concealed credential data and we provided decoy data in its place. And Singularity identity is going to disrupt that attack activity. Next is the attacker is going to execute low BAS. That's living off the land, binaries and scripts. Singularity Endpoint is going to prevent and respond to that execution, and is going to record the telemetry and provide forensics. It's going to collect all that forensic data. The attacker is going to attempt to move laterally. Singularity Identity is going to misdirect the lateral movement and is going to redirect telemetry and collect forensics. So it's going to record all that telemetry and collect the forensics. And then the attacker is going to compromise data. Singularity Endpoint is going to respond with rollback and quarantine, and it's going to get all that telemetry and data. Again, it's going to help you with that root cause analysis and to improve your security posture by identifying any gaps in your defenses. So I've talked a little bit about all this. Let's actually look to see what these systems, what these solutions actually look like. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And let me go ahead and minimize this. And I'm going to show you, whoops. I'm going to show you these two systems. Oops, hold on. Where is it? There it is. Sorry about that. And I'm going to show you let's see what's going on here. And I'm going to show you a dashboard of all of the information that's available. So let me first get onto my demo data. And first of all, I'm going to show you Ranger AD. Now, Ranger AD, as I mentioned, is an identity threat detection and it's an identity attack surface management solution. Now, what this is going to do is it's going to look at your Active Directory and identify any exposures and misconfigurations. So I'm going to go into the Ranger AD, and you'll notice here right away a dashboard. Now, over on the upper the upper left, you're going to see the most recent set of test results. You're going to see a health score. That health score shows that it's medium risk, and it's 51% because this Active Directory passed only 51% of the over 100 and something, over 200 different checks that Ranger AD will do against your Active Directory. And these exposures are here. It's going to show you what you passed and what you are vulnerable to. And it's going to break them down by high, very high, medium, and low. And also gives you a table. Now, these are actually filters. If I click on these, it'll actually show me these vulnerabilities in a graph. But I'm going to show you that in a moment in a table. Over to the left, to the right, you see that this is one forest. This forest is Starfleet Core. And you see historical data as well as a spark line showing how the health score is improved. This is the most recent set of um, uh, assessments. So it's going to show you a historical set of assessments for the past few days, so you can see how you're improving. Below that is going to give you some data in terms of the domains, the users, and the computer. So for example, you notice here we've got um, delegated admin, active ACL. One of them is unprotected. We've got some service accounts, both of which are unprotected. We've got some computers with dangerous delegations, etc. And then we have the most vulnerable set, and then we have protection events. Because RangeOAD actually works with Singularity Identity to help protect exposed objects. So speaking about exposures, you'll notice here that I have AD, but you notice here there's also Azure AD. That's because RangeOAD can handle both Active Directory on-premises exposures and Azure AD, now called Entra ID, exposures as well. We're one of the few solutions that can handle both on-premises and Cloud Active Directory and Entra ID exposures. So let's look to see what kind of information we can have here. So I'm going to load the Active Directory exposures, and you'll notice here immediately that I've got a list of all of the vulnerable assets, all the vulnerabilities that I've discovered over the past few days. Right? So for example, something like domain controller with print spooler enabled. Now, so for example here, this is one that gives me a details list. You'll notice that there's a details and there's a remediate. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it better. You'll notice here that some of these have details and some have remediate. That's because those with remediate, we can automatically generate a remediation PowerShell script so that you can remediate specific objects within the Active Directory. But for those that require manual intervention, all we're going to do is provide details. But these details are extremely valuable. Here's why. I'm going to give you in the details the summary. It's going to tell you why it's an issue. Now, for those of you who don't know, the print spooler service is part of a vulnerability called Print Nightmare. Now, Microsoft released a patch on this a long time ago, about 2 years ago. And realistically, you should not be vulnerable to this, except today, there was a news alert that came out that said that Kremlin-backed hackers have been exploiting a vulnerability in the print spooler, not related to Print Nightmare, for the past 4 years. The NSA had notified Microsoft, and Microsoft hadn't done anything about it in the past 2 years. So even if you patch this, if you have print spooler running, you are still vulnerable to attack, which is why we still flag it. Here are the remediation steps. We'll actually tell you how to mitigate and remediate this. So here is the mitigation, right? Here are the side effects. So printing from the domain controller can be impacted by this. So we're actually going to give you side effects for remediation. Not everyone will do that for you. And here's the full manual remediation steps. We will tell you exactly how to remediate this component. We'll even tell you that there are reference articles and that there are security patches available. We'll also give you more information about why it's an issue, in which case remote code execution using the print spooler service if it's improperly if it's active, and we'll even tell you the object. So in this case, it's the domain controller itself, which is the Borg. Okay, so that is Print Nightmare. There are a lot of others. And what I'm going to pull up is one that we can automatically remediate. And this is one that I feel is important because most people don't understand the extent to which this is a significant vulnerability. So this is unusual count of replication permissions. And the reason why this is bad is because you can conduct what's called the DC sync attack. The DC sync attack is what's part of what's called a golden ticket attack. And I'm actually going to show you a golden ticket attack in the next demo for Singularity Identity. So this is why this is bad. The counter replication permissions have full control, complete control of Active Directory because they can impersonate a domain controller. And consequently, they can also get password hashes. Password hashes is what golden ticket attacks rely on. Here are the known attack tools. Here is some references, actually a blog from SentinelOne. Here's the remediation, right? This is the manual remediation steps. Notice here the side effect. Any services that utilize accounts with these permissions may not operate properly. Why is this important? Because if you're running Entra ID and you do what's called federation where your on-premises Active Directory and your Entra ID sync together so that you can log on with single sign-on and have access to both your on-premises environment and your cloud environment using one login. There is a service account that is required to sync with Entra ID. That service account will have directory replication permissions. And if you remove that right, you're going to have a failure in that sync. So that's why we bring up that side effect. If you need it for business reasons, you can actually prevent it from being flagged as exposed to this exposure. And then here's the preparation for remediation. Here's the manual remediation steps. But remember how I said that we can do this automatically? Here's a remediate now button. But I'm going to go with that in a second because I want to show you the additional information. Here are all of the replication permissions that it covers. And here is the objects that are flagged. In this case, it's William Riker. You're going to see him again later. So if I run the remediate now, it's going to bring up the user account that I want to remediate. And here's that object. I click next. It's going to create a remediation script, right? It's going to have me generate the script. And when I generate the script, it's going to allow me to download it. And then it's going to allow me to execute it, which gives me the script to run it on the domain controller. And then it'll show me what was remediated. You notice here I've got to protect entities. This will actually work with Singularity Identity to help hide the exposed object. And this will help protect it, right? So any exposed objects that you cannot remediate for operational reasons, like that Entra ID service account, you can actually protect with Singularity Identity. But why am I bringing up the fact that you can look at it, you can remediate it this way? Because we allow rollback. Yes, you can roll back a remediation. So here you'll notice that if I choose this, I can roll it back if I've run it, or I can remediate it again. This will even give me the details as to what was remediated. So in this case, it's a certificate authority for the Borg. But the advantage with here is that you have a trail and rollback capabilities for any remediations you conduct. Super cool, very important. And then, as I mentioned, we have Azure exposures. We will actually give you the same type of detail for these Azure exposures and give you the mitigation steps as well. And we will explain everything as well. So that is Range AD. Now let's look at what William Riker can get into, because he is that guy that we have that is exposed because he has replication permissions. So these are two systems that are identical. They are logged in as the same user. The only difference is the system on the left with the purple background and the red command window is unprotected. The system on the right with the teal background and the green command window is protected. I'm going to run some scripts, the identical set of scripts on this endpoint. And you're going to see a golden ticket attack. And I'm going to run the exact same script on both. And you'll see that they are logged on as the exact same person. And I'm going to run them side by side so you can see how they differ, right? How the outputs differ. So who am I? This is John Luke. You'll notice it's the same here. So I'm going to check to see if this user is a local admin, and he is a local admin. I'm going to check if this user is a local admin on the protected system. Notice we have suppressed all the other local admins except the Starfleet domain admins group, which is typical. The domain admins will always be local admins. So that's always going to show up. But you notice we suppressed all of the other users, which in this case is Jean-Luc, Red Shirts, and Todd Rosenberry. So I'm going to check to see if this user is a domain admin. This user is a domain admin. I'm going to check here to see who the domain admins are. This just gives me a completely different set of users who aren't even part of Star Trek. They are the Star Wars canon users. Luke Skywalker, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. So I'm going to get a list of domain controllers. This is important because I want to know who to target. So here is the Borg.cd1-cd1. If I run that exact same command on a protected system, you notice I do not get the Borg-cd1. I get 3 decoy Active Directory domain controllers. So now I'm going to get a listing of service accounts in privilege mode. This is going to give me some information that I can use to further my attack. You notice I have the Kerberos ticket granting ticket is account. It's a service account running in privilege mode. I'm going to run that exact same command here. You notice it also gives me the Kerberos ticket granting ticket in a privilege mode. So now I'm going to find a user with replication permissions. And well, there you go. There's Will Riker. There's user William. So I'm going to run that exact same command here. I get nobody. I get enterprise read-only domain controller. They're hiding Will Riker. So I'm going to run that the next command, which is to look for memory. I'm going to check the memory for credentials, right? I have William's credentials in memory. So he recently logged onto this system. So here are his password hashes. And with those password hashes, I can use Mimikatz and run a DC sync attack. So I'm going to run the exact same command here. I actually got nothing, right? Since it's the same script, because like I told you, I'm running the exact same script, it's generating the fact that William has replication rights, but that would not actually show up because in regular output, this wouldn't show up. Okay, I'm going to run Mimikatz here. And it gives me his hashes. So this is the hashes of the Kerberos ticket granting ticket. The Kerberos ticket granting ticket account, I should say. And this failed because it'll give it access denied. And then I'm going to run a golden ticket attack. I'm going to try to create a golden ticket attack. So now I've run a golden ticket attack. And I'm going to create and insert Wesley as a golden ticket into memory. So I'm going to run the exact same ticket here. It says that it completed, but it actually didn't because I never got the Kerberos ticket granting ticket hash. As you can see, the klist command will list all Kerberos tickets in memory. In the green system, it has nothing. But in the red system, it has Wesley's golden ticket. So now I am logged onto this system as Wesley. I have full access as Wesley. So that is a golden ticket attack. And you can see the difference between a protected system and an unprotected system that's been protected by Singularity Identity. So where does all this show up? So this shows up in the dashboard for Singularity Identity. You'll notice all of these attacks just showed up in the recent events. This is the past hour. You'll notice here, this is in the past hour. So here's DC sync attack that was just detected a minute ago. Here's the privileged user enumeration. Here's a DC sync attack again. Here's the overpass the hash. That was actually a little while ago that I ran. We actually run regular attacks on here just so that the data keeps generating. But here is all of the attacks I just ran in the past 3 minutes. Okay, so now let's look at a little bit about the next attack. For those of you who aren't aware, what I'm going to run is this Lockbit. Lockbit is a piece of ransomware, and the FBI actually sent out a flash report a little while ago talking about Lockbit. So it's very well known. It is very widespread. And I'm actually going to run a demo where we're going to infect a bunch of systems. I'm going to play a video for this demo because the demo tends to take a really long time. So we've cut it down into the necessary components so that we can show it to you in a short amount of time. And I'm going to show you a full ransomware attack. So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen so I can play the video. All right. So here we go. So what we have here is 4 workstations. Now these 4 workstations are we're going to execute Lockbit, which you're going to see in the upper left. It's a very common ransomware variant. And the policies are set to alert only, so we can actually see what's executing. You'll see that Lockbit is executing on the system in the top left, and you can see that it's already stolen domain admin credentials and is now using GPO to spread the payload to every system it can find in the environment. Now, in this case, it's the three other systems that you see on the screen. Now, you're going to see screens popping up that the group policy is going to be executing on the other system. So we're just going to wait a moment until we see those screens popping up. So like I said, Lockbit is very widespread ransomware as a service. It's so easy that pretty much anybody with a bit of Bitcoin or cash can become an affiliate and get their own console to become a ransomware operator. Now you'll see a bunch of S1 EDR alerts alerting on the activity, but not stopping it because we set it in alert only mode. If it was in protect mode, it would be stopping all this activity, and this would be a really short demo. So the ransomware actor is now actively executing Lockbit on all of the systems. And pretty soon you're going to see screens starting to pop up. Now, these screens are going to pop up saying that the wallpaper is being changed, and basically it's saying that the files have been encrypted by Lockbit. So imagine how you would feel if you walked into the office on a Monday and you see all your systems with these screens on them. What would you do, right? What recourse would you have? You can restore from backup, but that's only good if you have a recent backup of every workstation. At the very least, you're going to lose a day's worth of work. Now, the ransomware note explains how you're going to send payment and decrypt your data. And that's going to take a lot of time and resources, right? So let's pivot over now to the ransomware console. So here he is opening up the ransomware note. This gives you the Bitcoin wallet that you're going to send to. So we're going to pivot to the S1 console. And it's collapsed all of these events into a single incident that we can look at. This makes it easier for analysts to investigate because you're not getting a bunch of different alerts. You're only getting one. So we're going to pull up the alert view, and I'm going to go into the alert, look at all of the IOCs, and we're going to map them to the BIDA framework automatically so you can investigate them easier. And then I'm going to pull up the storyline so that I can see everything that's happening in this attack, right? This is everything from the initial access to the lateral movement, how the attackers leverage GPO to spread, and how it detonated the malware, right? So this is the entire attack chain by process. We're able to see everything that happened in this entire attack across all these systems. So let's go and mitigate them. We're going to select every system, and we're going to isolate them as part of this incident, right? So every endpoint that we flagged that it's in the part of this incident, we've just isolated. Now we're going to go into the mitigation menu, right? And we're going to take mitigation actions. You see we can do kill, quarantine, remediate. We want to roll it back. And here we're going to tag it as a legitimate event. It's a true positive. And then we're going to roll it back and to a known good state. So let's switch back to the systems, and then you'll see that all these systems are getting rolled back all to the most recent snapshot because we actually use the volume shadow copy services. So we're going to get the most recent snapshot. So depending on your setting, it's approximately 15 minutes worth of work that you're going to lose. So a little while later, we've got everything rolled back from a single console and a single agent. We didn't have to mount up any backup tapes. We didn't have to write any restoration scripts. We didn't have to install anything to recover the files. We had full telemetry to look at the entire timeline of the attack, and we had full recovery in a matter of moments. So think of all that amount you can save. In fact, we're going to pull up a list of all of the files that were rolled back and restored from volume shadow copy. This is over 2,200 different files that were restored in a matter of seconds from this console. Imagine the power that you have to neuter a ransomware attack if you had all of this capability at your fingertips. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and take and answer questions. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to post up some information here so that you can gather more information.
Okay. We only have time for one or two quick questions here. You had so much great information, Joseph, that that we're running out of time, but we'll get to a couple of them here. And everybody keep your eyes on that on the QR codes here. And don't forget, there's a couple of handouts still that you can get before we're done today. So a couple of real quick questions here. Warren wants to know, will this work in an Apple Mac environment?
Yes, it will. It will absolutely work in an Apple Mac environment. It may not, the rollback may not be available, but everything else is available. If you're on Active Directory, Ranger AD will work. Our EDR component does work well on Mac. It also works on Linux. Our Linux endpoint is very robust as well. But yes, it will work in a full Mac environment. I just don't know to what extent it will do the rollback, but I know that in Windows it works 100%.
Okay, great. And let's see. One more quick question is, this is from Brian. Is Singularity Identity, which you've talked about here at some length, a separate module, or is it included in the server license?
So it is licensed separately, but it is part of the same agent. We have released, it's actually in early access right now, a unified agent so that it's not a separate install. It currently is because it came from an acquisition with a company called Ativo Networks, where I came from. And so it was a separate agent, and that actually will become embedded in the standard EDR endpoint agent in the near future, actually within a quarter. So it's already in early access. But yes, it is a separate license. You can activate it. So if you don't need it, you don't have to activate it, but it is an endpoint license. We can run a server version on a domain controller, but the endpoint license, it's actually better because most attacks originate from the endpoint. And so we will want to be at the source of the attack rather than a destination.
It's also always great to have options here too, which is
exactly.
is what this gives you. Absolutely. Okay. Well, Joseph, this has been such a delight to have you on. I love the demo, and the presentation was just fabulous. I learned a ton, and I think all of our attendees did today as well. I wanted to mention that any questions that we don't get to here during the event, that SentinelOne will be following up on. So don't worry if you didn't get a question answered live today. Joseph, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. So we're getting close to wrapping up here today. We just have one more little piece of business before we let you go. And that is the prize that we need to give away. As I mentioned at the top, it was $250 Amazon gift card, and you do need to be present for the entire event to be eligible. We have chosen a winner for today's event, and that winner is Steve Bezra from Massachusetts. Congratulations to you, Steve. Sit tight, and we will be in touch to get you your card. Well, folks, that's it. We are wrapped. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank SentinelOne for making this event possible, and thanks always to you, the attendees, for being here with us, for spending part of your afternoon with us, for your great questions and your interest in this topic. I thought it was an absolutely fascinating event, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. That includes the event for today, folks. I will see you soon, and have a great rest of your day.